this 10 minutes about. Today we're going to discuss the FuelEU Maritime regulation. I've invited Maria from our sister company, Bunker Holding. Maria, maybe you will briefly introduce yourself.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And yes, my name is Maria Skipper and I work for Bunker Holding, where I'm a Director of Environmental, Regulatory and Public Affairs. What does that mean? Well, that means basically we need to keep track of all the regulation that is really hitting the maritime industry in this years and for many years to come. And not only keep track of the regulation, but also exercise influence, because the regulation will have a huge impact on us as bunker industry as well.
And one of these regulations that are coming or is here is the FuelEU Maritime regulation. Can you tell me a bit about that? Explain what is the EU Fuel Maritime regulation?
Yeah, what is FuelEU Maritime? FuelEU Maritime is the regulation that sets requirements for what you burn in your fuel tank. Notoriously, shipping has been known for not really being regulated, but that changed with the introduction from Brussels of the Fit for 55 package, the huge legislative package that should bring Europe to be the first net zero continent by 2050 and have a reduction of 55% CO2 emissions by 2030. So Fit for 55 means the regulation that will bring Europe to the target of reducing by 55%. So what does that mean for shipping? First of all, you have the regulation ETS that puts a price on your emissions, but it goes hand in hand with FuelEU Maritime that then sets requirement for what you can burn in your fuel tank. To be honest, in theory, you could just pay your way out if we were only or if shipping was only included in the ETS. You could basically, in theory, keep paying your EU allowances for your emissions without actually burning anything else. Of course, at a certain point, it doesn't make sense to just keep paying. That's why it's a really good proposal that came from Brussels, that you're actually also required to put something else in your fuel tanks.
So that is the way it basically will affect the ship owners, the fuel suppliers, and so on.
Yes, well, in practice, you need to lower the greenhouse gas intensity for whatever fuel you burn in your tank. That means that if you're a ship owner or an operator, you need to make sure that the regulation will come in 2025, and then it will be phased in gradually, as you see on the screen right now, 2%, 6%, 14.5%, 31, 62, and then 80% by 2050. So it starts out slowly by requiring you to blend in something else, a different fuel than you're already burning today.
Well, we talk a lot about carbon emissions. This regulation, does that take all emissions into account, or is it just carbon?
It is all greenhouse gas emissions, and it applies the perspective of well to wake. So that means that the fuel will be evaluated from the production phase and all the way to the emissions from the vessel itself, not just the tank to wake. So you need to take the whole production phase into consideration as well.
So this is what we call sort of a full life cycle perspective.
Exactly, full life cycle, or LCA.
Yes. Maria, this is the EU. What about the rest of the world? Will they sort of apply to this? Will they have the same regulation? Will this be the new standard, or is this a European EU thing?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. Because usually, Europe has lost its patience with IMO. I don't know how many times I've heard European politicians say, well, it's too slow with IMO. So that's why this regulation was introduced and now adopted and will enter into force in 25. Well, first of all, the geographical scope does not only cover just intra-EU voyages, it also covers 50% of your legs between third countries and Europe. So if you're trading from, let's say, Shanghai to Rotterdam, you will have to be 50% of that leg will also be covered by the FuelEU Maritime.
So Maria, a lot of regulation here. What if we take it from the point of the bunker suppliers, from the sort of point of from Bunker Holding point of view? how have you positioned yourself?
Yeah.
What can you offer the ship owners here in this area?
Well, it's not only going to be a game changer for the shipping industry, but also for the bunker industry. We're going to start to have to supply different kinds of fuels than we've done historically. The immediate and most straightforward solution for a ship owner is to blend in a biofuel. And right now, I mean, this is already happening. And bunker holding around the world has now secured supply in more than 80 ports around the world of biofuel. Secondly, you can also burn LNG in order to meet the requirement of lowering the GHG intensity in your fuel. And then, of course, there are the e-fuels in the future. But as you saw on the screen before with the graph, the steep curve or the steep drop in the curve will not be there until in the 30s. So that makes sense that you start, gradually in the 20s by what you already have off the shelf. That would be biofuels, bioblends, and LNG.
No doubt this is a very ambitious regulation initiative. Do you think it's doable in the real world?
I think it is doable, especially when you see the percentages that you're required. I mean, 2-6% here in the 20s. I mean, that is not a lot, and it doesn't take any alternation of your engine. It's already there, the biofuel. Yes, of course, that is not an endless resource, and of course, it may become more expensive, but this goes for all industries in Europe. And it goes not only for European shipping, but it goes also for vessels calling European ports. So you cannot even say that there is no even level playing field or distortion of competition. If you're calling a European port, you will have to have increased cost either in the way of alternative fuel and, of course, then your ETF allowances.
Maria, before we finish off for today, maybe you can just explain to me the difference between tank to wake and well to wake. These concepts, maybe there's also a viewer or two that are a bit confused.
Definitely, and they're very, very important for securing that we make the right choices for the future. So basically, tank to wake is the combustion on board the vessel, everything that happens on board the vessel and the emissions from the combustion on board the vessel. That can be very, very different from the well to tank. That is the production phase, the transportation, everything, the storage, everything that happens before the fuel is burned on board the vessel. And there is a huge difference in how much is emitted during the production phase between the various fuel types. And but at the end of the day, when the emissions come out from the stack of the vessel, well, then you can't really tell whether it has been produced in an environmentally friendly way. But one thing is for sure, that with the price difference between the fuels, it does make sense that you can also show the exact production way. And that's why it's so important that we're now working from a well-to-wake perspective. So that means taking all the emissions into consideration so that we don't get locked in a inefficient production pathway.
Well, Maria, you also told me that this also plays a role in the IMO regulations that we had disagreement over. So maybe just how does these concepts relate to the IMO?
Exactly. I mean, now IMO has decided that IMO will apply the well-to-wake, the full well-to-wake perspective. That requires a lot of work because you need to define and agree on emission factors for all kinds of production paths to various kinds of fuels. So there is a huge piece of work going on right now. But it is so important so that we can secure the right choices for the future, both for ship owners, but also for bunker suppliers, and that we have the full transparency.
Thank you, Maria. We'll talk more about the IMO in another video, another day. Looking forward to that. But for today, thank you for coming into the studio.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching.